Yeah.
But I love what you talked about earlier is even if you can do in micro steps and micro moments to really challenge that, right? Like, because whether we're talking about OCD or ADHD or anxiety or fear is very real for so many of us. And so it's how do we step into that in a way that, honors us where we are, but honors us in where we want to be and where we
Exactly.
want to go.
Yeah.
Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicky Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And we have a little bit of admin work you got to do. Just get in there and hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you're subscribing to the WIL Talk podcast so you get the latest and greatest episodes that get downloaded every week right into your inbox. So do make sure you hit subscribe. I'm very excited to have a guest with me today where we're going to be talking about how fear might hold you back. So does fear make you forget everything and run or face everything and rise? So welcome, Renee Zukin. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we're going to have a great conversation. Actually, this conversation is near and dear to me because I happen to have a daughter that can relate very much to you. And so I can't wait for us to get into the conversation. But I do want to give our audience a little bit of background so they understand why I invited you. Renee is an author, educator, professional coach, and a passionate mental health advocate. She has just released her new book called Every Day I'm Brave, Cultivating Resilience to Gain Freedom from Fear. This is part memoir and manifesto, and entirely a call for women to live with courage, even when fear doesn't go away. And we know how fear can impact us, right? She is uniquely qualified to speak with nuance, heart, and humor about mental health. With over 20 years in education, writing, entrepreneurship, and healing work, she combines personal insight, including being diagnosed with OCD in her adulthood, with deep professional expertise to offer a radically compassionate lens on anxiety, self-acceptance, and building a more resilient mindset, including a whole bunch of other wonderful things about Renee. So Renee, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I just, the more we can talk about fear and the ways it can, halt or catapult us, I feel like the better off we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also, I think, bringing attention to neurodivergent challenges, whether it's OCD, anxiety, ADHD, like these are really important topics, especially in the environment we're in today. So it's really brave of you to come forward and talk about this. So thank you for doing so. Ah, well, let's jump in. So, you have your book, Every Day I'm Brave. You've described it as part memoir, part manifesto. So, what was that moment or series of moments that made you realize the book actually needed to come to life?
Yeah, it was something that was kind of tapping me on the shoulder for quite some time, but it really was about 3 years ago where that tap just, was more like a nudge and then more like you better do this
Then
or
a
else.
shove?
Right. Yeah. And then the shove off the cliff. Exactly. But it really was, certainly post pandemic. Anxiety's on the rise for all of us. I was, transitioning out of my position as a middle school teacher and into full-time entrepreneurship and coaching, and seeing just the through line everywhere of how anxiety and fear and self-doubt was really, holding people back, or just, this constant underlying message of fear, even, in social media and on the news, and the ways in which so many people and places had been really leaning into fear as this is the status quo. And I can't stand it. There's a better way. Fear is very present in my life, and I knew that there was a message in here from my own experience, from the experiences I've had now working with my students and my clients, of hope and of a different way we can relate to fear that allows us to still have a pretty good life.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And, you said a couple things there, like almost like during the pandemic, it just sort of opened Pandora's box on so much of the fear. And still people are living in that fear, right? Like it's a bit of the what if. And the what if can go either way, right? It can go, like we said in the beginning, it can make you run or it can help you to rise. And so good for you for taking that step. So I'd love to get into your diagnosis of OCD in adulthood. So can you share like what that experience, what it's been like for you, but also what it has clarified for you about, the things that, your patterns, your habits, your
Yeah.
rituals, your story, all
Right.
those good things.
Right, right. Yeah, so I was in my early 30s when I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was after a long time of misdiagnosis and not really being sure what was happening. As a teenager, I certainly had, the general teenage angst that is often involved in that experience, but also bouts of depression, certainly anxiety, although we didn't really call it that back in the, late 80s, early 90s. And it just kind of followed me through my life. But the thing about OCD that many people who maybe don't know somebody uh personally who experience it, you see on the media, oh, it's just like, checking and unchecking the locks, or it's, wanting things really organized. And the reality is that OCD is a very internal experience. There's a lot of things happening in the mind and in the body that you don't see on the outside. And one of the trademarks of OCD is that there's intrusive thoughts that can latch on to particular things. And in my early 30s, the OCD had latched onto this idea that my food was unsafe. And so after a time, as I would sit down to a meal and suddenly be kind of bombarded with this fear, I was eating less and less. And so that very internal experience was something that became very externally noticeable. I had lost a significant amount of weight. And at first they thought, oh, maybe I was anorexic, but it wasn't really. There was a lot of things that weren't really in play there that matched. And then, a couple other things went down the pipe. And then finally, when I got paired with a therapist who worked with specifically with OCD and anxiety and got this diagnosis. And as I learned about it and read about it, I was like shocked to have such a clear picture of my experience and understanding why did things that I did, in my growing up, in my young adult years, and how this kind of ebbed and flowed and manifested in different ways. And, for me, having an accurate diagnosis wasn't like, okay, this is this thing, you're never going to get over it. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't a nail in the coffin. It wasn't like, oh, okay. It was really a light, and it gave me clarity, and it gave me an opportunity to seek out different kinds of support and therapy that would really match my brand of brain. Like,
Mm,
talk therapy is wonderful and I use it, for all sorts of things. But for OCD, that's not the right treatment.
mhm.
It's not gonna get you anywhere, and, I didn't know that, and other people didn't know that, so it really was able that's what I believe is, I'm not defined by my diagnoses, and I don't think anybody is, but it helps us know more about ourselves, and it helps us get a more accurate, support and treatment.
So what have you found? Because I think that's interesting what you were saying. Like it does give you clarity. So now you understand why you're doing certain behaviors, right? It helps the people around you better understand, which also is difficult, right? Because I catch myself. I'm sorry, but I do catch myself when my daughter will say certain things and I'm like, "Well, you don't have to do that." And she's like, "Mom, it's my OCD. I can't help it. I'm doing this," right? And
Yes.
it is tough, right?
It
And
is,
we've
absolutely.
tried a few different therapies and they haven't worked in her particular case.
Mhm.
Um, and she's kind of like you, like where it's like feel the fear and do it anyway, because
Yeah.
that anxiety will become very strong, more sometimes for certain situations more than other situations, but most of the time she will just push herself to, which is hard, right? And you
It's
can see it's
exhausting.
agony. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, and that's why for me, one of the biggest things about coming to this realization that bravery is really this full spectrum experience. And it's really a muscle that we get to use. And some days my capacity for being brave is huge. And some days my capacity for being brave looks really, really, minuscule or different. It's brave that I got out of bed and brushed my teeth, and that's about all I could do. And other days it's like I'm hopping on a plane and I'm, hanging out with my friends on the beach. It's just, and that's okay. And that we have to celebrate each of those
Hmm.
pieces, the small wins and the big wins. Yeah.
Nice. Very good. And so, one of your central messages is about stop waiting for fear to go away. So let's talk about that because I see this on a variety of spectrums, whether it's, young people going into the working world, they're terrified of the rejection. It could be high performing executives taking on the next level, or they have to do a talk that they wouldn't have normally done. So that fear shows up for lots of people in lots of different ways. So what does real radical bravery look like in a moment by moment, day by day type situation?
Love what you're speaking to because everybody has a challenge, right? When it comes to fear, especially if we're, especially honestly in leadership, right? If we're in this role where we're having to show up and we're having to lead and not having, we're getting to, right? Like this is an amazing opportunity to guide other people. And it's really scary, right? People are looking to us to, you know, know the answers, highlight the way, right? And it can be very scary. And I love all those examples that you brought in too. And it's really this, that we can't fight it, right? So the fear is going to come up no matter what. That's self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, the inner critic, right? These are messages and thoughts that we're having all the time. And once I realized, and once I had, my mentors and my therapists kind of allow me the space to understand that those things are just going to be there and we can allow them to just be there. And I'd fight him all the time on this. I'm like, how can I just let it be there? I'm like, I'm having this full body experience. And he's just let it be there, right? But the tricky part is we recognize that we have this fear or we're having these thoughts that are, kind of keeping us at an impasse. And then we'll add other things on top of it, like shame and guilt.
Hmm.
Oh, well, I should be able to do this without being afraid. Or why can't I just get it together and show up at this thing, right? And that adds on this weight that is just is so unnecessary. And that's really the piece that I think gets in the way ultimately.
Hmm.
And so this act of bravery is noticing that the fear is there, allowing it to be there, and kind of, maybe you sidestep it a little bit, but having some tools to, you hear the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway,
Hmm.
right? And that looks different for different opportunities. But I think it really starts with this awareness of I don't have to add all the stuff on
Yeah.
top of it
Yeah.
because that's the stuff that really holds you back.
No
Not the
kidding.
fear.
So I love that because I hadn't actually thought of it that way. And so I think that's very powerful because you're right. It is all of the other stories or things that accumulate or pile on top of that really does, that's where that anxiousness comes from, right? And just feeling like so I just don't want to do it then, right? And so then
Right.
we cocoon, or like
Yeah.
I don't want to be with these people because I don't want to have to feel these feelings. And
Mhm.
so that really does compound the situation.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. So, okay. So you also talk about trusting your gut can be harmful for those of us that have anxious minds.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that? Like how is that? Like I'm a big gut believer,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But I know that's not true for everyone. So what can that look like for others?
I love this question. And so, for people who really experience anxiety in a full bodied way, right, your gut literally can be wreaking havoc in a moment of fear. And so it's not that I don't believe we shouldn't trust, the phrase trust our gut, trust your intuition. Absolutely, you should trust in your intuition and you should, check in with your body. What am I feeling? But what I also know is that as the brain and body work together, the brain is sending, right? These anxious thoughts are sending signals that aren't accurate to the body.
Mm.
Right. So maybe I got a little butterflies in my stomach, but maybe I feel like I'm about to be sick. Right? And I'll give you an example that's actually, one of those kind of small everyday examples, but like I'll often feel kind of nauseous before I go meet a friend for coffee. It's a thing that happens, something about it makes me anxious. What are we going to talk about? Like, oh, I had these
I relate to
thoughts.
it. My
Yeah,
daughter's the same.
it's just a thing. Like all the things that, could go wrong, but what are all the things that could go right? But so I'll have this feeling and I'll notice I'm like, "Oh, I'm feeling kinda sick. I wonder if it's something I ate. I wonder," and then my brain goes into this whole direction. And then I have to stop and think about what I like to say, I have to look at the evidence. Well, how many times before when I've kind of felt this way and I got in my car anyway and I got to the coffee shop and I met my friend, within minutes, I felt amazing, right? All that went away. And so you have to learn to discern. Obviously, when you're really feeling sick, like it feels a little different than just, maybe I'm, right? So being able to discern, okay, my body's feeling this way now. And sometimes it's even just making the choice to get in the car that changes everything. Right? Because the anticipation, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go, is like just magnifies that experience. So really being in the action, okay, I'm just going to choose the next step. Maybe I'm not going to decide. I will often text my friends and be like, I'm planning to be there. I'll let you know about 30 minutes before if I'm not going to make it. And they get it. They're like, okay, you know.
Well,
So
it's good that they get it.
yes.
And that says a lot about your friend group, right? And but that's a very real what you're talking about there. That's a very real testament to what happens, right? And internally you do want to,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? But then there's this other side of you that's going, "Oh my gosh, no. Like what are we going to talk about? What if nobody talks to me? What if like all the what
All the
if
things.
of
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. And to your point, the brain goes into that amygdala hijack of fight or flight and how do I protect myself? How do I make sure I don't put myself in that situation? And so then that can become if you don't feel the fear and do it anyway, that can become very isolating and limiting.
Absolutely. And that's where I had been for quite a long time is I wasn't even leaving my house. I was barely calling a friend. I had lived a very isolated and pretty lonely existence and that's not good for anybody.
No, and so Renee, how did you make that pivot? Because I think that from what I've read and what I've heard, like that is very common when we have OCD. I see it with my mom, like she's later in life now and she has stages of dementia. But before that even happened, I saw that isolation happening and not like she was terrified to go out. So what steps did you take to make that transition?
Mm. It took time for sure. And at the time where it was probably at the worst, this was definitely post pandemic. I was one of those folks that it took a good while for me to feel comfortable being unmasked in a room with other people. That's, no shame. It's
Yep,
just took me longer.
just the way it was.
That's the way it was. And at the time, my therapist, who I'd been working with for about a decade, he had retired during the pandemic, but he got me linked up with another guy who he had mentored, and it turned out to be just a great match and one of the best gifts because the work we did was super experiential. All telehealth, by the way.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah, in the book, I detail some of the things that we kind of worked through and did, but it really was, I mean, it's taking that one small step at a time and really noticing and understanding that, this sense of safety,
Mhm.
for a lot of folks, the reason you isolate and the reason that you end up not really doing much is because you're fearing the fear. That was very true for me. I was having panic attacks, kind of left and right anytime I left my house. And so, which is a horrible feeling, and you want to do everything you can to avoid it. But if you avoid all of that stuff, you never get the benefits of being out in the world, of connecting with other people. And for me, I had to be willing to do the uncomfortable work in order to gain the benefit of being with the people that I love
Mhm.
and meeting new people and having new experiences and getting more joy in my life. And so it was definitely a process, but little by little, sometimes it was just I'd have therapy in my car.
Okay, that's a good step though. It got you out of the house,
It
right?
did, exactly. Driving on the interstate and the highways was always a thing for me. And eventually, like, it got to a point where, he'd be on my phone and doing it. And, the therapist would talk me through, okay, we're just getting on this exit and off. Like, I just get on the on and the off ramp. And, this is all exposure therapy. And that it really is, again, it goes back to looking at the evidence, right?
Mhm.
So I had to first see the evidence of, okay, when I sat in my car, even though I felt a little anxious and I worked through these panic feelings, I was safe.
Mm.
And then I could take the next step
Mhm.
and the next and the next.
Wow. Wow. Well, and I think that often that's true with so many things. It's those micro moments, right? And not trying to, go from A to Z or A to Z overnight. It is literally in anything you're trying to do or enhance. It is that practicing and testing. Is it safe? Is
Yeah.
it safe for me to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as we talk about, women leaders and women entrepreneurs and people doing this kind of work, I mean, being out there and being visible can be really scary. When you're putting yourself out there on social media or you're leading a talk or you want to enroll a client, like these are scary things that with practice and every time, you're testing the waters and you can do it exactly like you said. It's that one small step. Maybe today I post this one sentence and then, next week I'll do it 3 times with some pictures.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's such a great example because it is scary because you go into all of the stories of, oh my gosh, who's going to judge me? What are people going to say? Oh, I know they're talking about me. And what we forget is most of the time they're not even aware because they're in their own head so much. You're not even like aware of the people around you, right? And I think that's pretty much an epidemic that we have that
Right.
we're so inward focused, right? That you don't realize. And, I had a group of women earlier today that I was working with, and one person she was making a few comments, and I said, well, it's really none of your business what they think.
Yes.
And she went, what? And then another woman spoke up and she went, yeah, it's mind your own business. Like, focus on your mind and what are you telling yourself? And I thought it was such a great conversation, right? Because we often do think, we're under the spotlight and everybody's going to be looking and judging, and we don't want judgment. And I think that's a big thing where that fear comes in, right? And really recognizing how do we overcome that. And also, you were talking about women leaders. Often we, will come across on the outside as being super confident and we are high impact and we have these great jobs, but internally, right? There's this whole fear going on. Am I an imposter? You mentioned that earlier. Am I faking it until I make it? And you talk about it being the performing confidence.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
maybe touch on that a little bit with us.
Yeah, I love it. It's so true. And we're all out here, we're looking fancy and great and like we got it all together. And everybody has some sort of challenge on their inner landscape, right? It's just true. And the more we realize that, I think the more too that we can be authentic in our leadership, then the more others will feel safe to do that as well. I mean, certainly, it's not like we want to show up in our biggest mess. That's not what we're saying here, right? If we're in the middle of going through it, we might need to cancel something. But that in and of itself is, takes bravery and courage to say, look, I'm having a hard time and I'm going to need a minute and I might need to reschedule this meeting or do something, change this up but there's this like the weight of that fake it till you make it, or I've got to show up and I've got to keep going and I have to just shove whatever this is down that I'm experiencing. Again, it kind of is that shame thing. Oh, it's shameful to be up in front of people and admit that you're nervous.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's now one of the first things that I'll do. This is pretty easeful for me. Virtual talks, great. I love it. Get me on a mic anytime. So much fun. And if I was in a room full of people, it's a little bit different for me. I can do it, but I will notice that my legs are shaking. And sometimes I'll just call it out. Or I'll start the talk and I'll say, hey, let's take a collective breath, right? And it just brings the room together. And I'll say, I needed that for me. Some of you may have needed it too. And then we can move on from there. It's like we don't have to hide what is, for many of us, feels really obvious, like,
Yeah.
oh, they could see my legs shaking,
Yeah.
right? Like, and probably not. But for many of us, this is what we're experiencing. And it allows us to connect really in a deeper way when we can name it.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. I mean, I think about, often people are sitting in the audience in that particular situation and they're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could go up on that stage and do that. Right. And that fear does hold them back.
Mhm.
Right. And then you'll have a few who sit back and make comments and they might be critical. And that's okay too. I mean,
Yes.
that's right. Like again, it's none of your business what they say about
Right.
you. And
Right.
and being comfortable with who you are being and how you're showing up. I think that's such a powerful message at any age or stage of life because people will always have opinions, right? I had a client once say to me, she worked for one of the big 4 consulting firms, and one of the women who had broken the glass ceiling commented about her attire of how she dressed, right? And my client was pretty upset. And she was like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this. And just for the record, my client probably is one of the best dressers I've ever met in my life. Like, I mean, she's dressed to the nines.
Mm.
But this senior female partner was the navy blue suit, white shirt, very starch, very male, very traditional. And I said to my client, I said, I think some of those comments may be coming from the fact that she doesn't feel comfortable or confident in herself to be able to express herself through her clothing. And so she's blending, and you don't want to blend, right? And so I mean that's a minor example,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
people will make comments. And she told her, she says, you'll never make senior partner the way you dress. And my client is senior partner now. But I'm sharing that, right? Because that's an example of if my client had taken that to heart, she could have told herself that story of, oh my gosh, I can't be authentic. I can't show up as how I and who I am, right? And that's the beauty of that's why social media has exploded because people are showing up exactly how they are, right? So, in most
Yeah,
cases.
and what you said too, like it's her comment is so much more about her and
Correct.
what she is
Yes.
challenged by than anybody else, and that's so true for, any of the quote unquote haters out there, right?
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Put the mirror up.
Right, right.
So, Renee, what do you wish more people knew about OCD that definitely, it's one of those things that doesn't get talked about?
Hmm, that's a great question. For me, I think really being able to understand how deeply OCD is kind of entrenched in control and safety, than anything else, because there's a real sense internally for folks with OCD that whatever it is that they're latching onto is unsafe. And there's this degree of uncertainty that, your mind kind of wills you to get to. You have to be certain enough. Um, and so, I'm kind of joking at what you spoke to in conversation with your daughter, and, my family will do it to me too. Can't you just, and I'm constantly asking questions for reassurance. I make a joke in my book about how I'm always asking if this is my water. Is this my water? It'll be the only water on the table. I would have just put it down, but there's something that compels me to make sure
That
that
it's
it is my water before I drink it. And so just to have some compassion, right? And to understand that there's something much deeper going on, which doesn't mean that, we should be able to ask the question all the time. My therapist tells my family not to answer me.
okay. Interesting.
Yes, sometimes that makes me really, really angry because, again, that's the capacity thing. Some days I can take it. Some days I'm like, okay, it's probably my water. Look around, I'll check the evidence. All right, no problem. I'm going to drink it. And other days I'm pouring myself a new cup. Like if I can't ascertain the certainty enough.
Mhm.
And I think that's just something that people who are not very familiar with the experience don't understand, that uncertainty is what really causes the panic. And the reality is, for every single one of us, we can never be 100% certain about anything. And so our work is to get comfortable with that discomfort, with the uncertainty, and how much time can I spend in the gray area, and how courageous can I be in the gray area. And I think that's true across the board for all sorts of challenges in life.
Wow. I totally agree. Wow. That was very powerful what you just said. And I think that's true no matter where you are, right? And we certainly have been living that on a global scale the last, several years.
Mhm.
A lot of you see it, you feel it, right? Probably more than ever. And so that level of trust with what we always knew is not necessarily there anymore. And yeah, that's a tough one for many of us, right? Yeah. Wow. Okay. So if you could rewrite this internal script, let's talk about what would you want the new script to say?
Rewriting the internal script of OCD and of this uncertainty.
Yeah, and of fear. I think
Yeah.
fear is probably that's the crux of it, right?
Yeah.
How would you rewrite it?
I think it's about inviting the voice of fear, being able to sit down and have a conversation with the fear parts, because they're here to teach us something. And what that may be could be different for, any given person on any given day, but there's a message there. And if we're willing to take a moment to honor the fear, it loses some of its hold. And then, we also get to decide, right? And by we, I mean, the wise parts of ourselves, the authentic self aware, conscious parts of ourselves who are observing all these different thoughts, these fears, these feelings. And we can, work to rewrite the story so that fear isn't the one calling the shots.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. Yeah, not an easy path to take,
Yeah.
but I love what you talked about earlier is even if you can do in micro steps and micro moments to really challenge that, right? Like, because whether we're talking about OCD or ADHD or anxiety or fear is very real for so many of us. And so it's how do we step into that in a way that, honors us where we are, but honors us in where we want to be and where we
Exactly.
want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Wow. Amazing conversation, Renee. Like, thank you for joining us and sharing your journey, and tell us where people can find your book. I hate asking that question because
Yeah, I
everybody
know.
goes, Vicky, Amazon, of course, but tell us where. And also if people have questions, because I know there'll be questions that come up from this.
Yeah.
So how do they reach you? How do they continue the conversation if maybe we didn't talk about something that is, really
Yeah.
on their mind?
Yeah, thank you for that invitation. So, all things Everyday I'm Brave, www.everydayimbrave.com. You'll find links to the books. So, if you don't want to order on Amazon, there's multiple options for you. And there are some resources there. And certainly you can find me and contact me through that site as well. And I'm on the socials, just my name, Renee Zukin. You can find me.
Awesome.
Love to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I think, anybody who is navigating this journey, like, definitely, if we didn't ask something that you think, Vicky, why didn't you ask Renee this? Because I know there's something. Please do reach out to Renee. Or if you can't reach Renee, reach out to me and I'll make sure Renee gets the message and we can share that. So yeah, Renee, this has been amazing. Thank you. And congratulations on the steps that you've taken, because I know that's not an easy journey and takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery to do that. So continue the good work and continue, doing what really drives you. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you. Such an honor to be here, Vicky.
Such a pleasure. And audience, thank you for chiming in. We know you have a choice, so we're really grateful that you did chime in and that you're listening to the episode. If you have someone in your life who may be having some of these struggles, whether it's with fear, ADHD, anxiety, OCD, share this episode with them. It may be just what they need to hear to help take those next steps in helping them overcome some of those fears. And I'm not saying that's easy. I know it's not. And, if you're interested, we have a free mini course on our website. So you can visit us at Women in Leadership Empowered. That's 1L. And there's a great course on there that talks about overcoming fear and habits. So that played right into this episode. And again, thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care and have a great day. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.